All right, so what I like to do first is take you through your mobility, because I can pretty much, doing this long enough, I can predict how you're going to move just looking at your mobility, because your mobility is telling me what your basically your system can do, like where it can go. So when I see where it can go and where it can't go, I pretty have a good understanding of how you're going to throw through that movement, right? So it's good to understand that it's really hard to fix the movements or the mechanics without fixing the body, like changing the body, right?
Right.
And that's the goal here. The goal is to create an adaptation here to make the body change. Specifically, how old are you?
14.
So you're really young. So if we can do this over the next 2-3 years, it would really benefit you, because we could improve the way your body naturally wants to move and develop strength and stuff. So I have some of your measurements in here, like your 31-inch vertical jump means you got some quickness in you. The goal would be, as you grow and get bigger, stronger, faster, that you keep that good 30+ inch vertical jump. Your broad was a little lower than where it should have been with that good vertical jump, which probably means there's some mobility challenges here. And I looked through it and I can see you do have some mobility challenges that you just need to focus on over the next couple of years so they can get better. Okay? What you're going to find is pitching relies heavily on the hips, and your hips are tight. So are mine. So it's a challenge for a lot of pitchers, but they're so important to converting what you create in the ground to how you get energy to the ball. So the reason pitchers stride so far is because they're using the ground to create force, create energy, and then they're going to push that up to the ball. And that's how you throw even harder, the better you get at that. So if you have tight hips, it's like a transmission. It makes it hard for that energy to push up because your hips are stuck. And then your upper body winds up trying to overcompensate.
Right.
So it's usually the process. So if we look here, let's go trunk rotation. That was when you turn your shoulders close. On your arm side, it was really good. On your non-arm side, it wasn't. It's good that it's as good on your arm side, your throwing side, but the problem is that could be injury over time. You want to keep balance in your body just to prevent injury. So we would want to see that improve through a lot of the core training. Will do that. Hip abduction, super tight on you. That was the one where you spread your legs out like this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So think of this one here, because this one's so tight on you that if you have a hard time doing this, our first movement as a pitcher is to do that. To go sideways down the mound, right? The first thing we do is to see how far we can spread our legs up.
Yep.
And the reason we do that is because that's how we build a stride to create energy. We create momentum. So if you're stuck on how far you can spread your legs out, what's going to happen is you're going to turn and collapse early, and you're going to kill a lot of power.
Make a lot of sense.
So we got to work on this one, and we're going to show you through the camp how to work on it.
Okay.
Because it's going to take away a lot of your leg power. Okay? Your dorsiflexion, which is your ankle mobility coming back, that's important. How we push. So how we can come back creates how much force we can push. It's pretty tight. So it's going to affect how you create ground force. Your hip internal rotation, that was this one. Okay. That's tight too, and that's important because remember I start sideways, I build momentum, then I rotate.
Yep.
So what allows my hip to rotate is this femur rotating inward like that. So if this thing's tight, now my hips aren't going to come around. And if my hips can't come around, it's hard to bring my arm around.
Right.
Okay, so it's going to limit how you transfer some of that energy. So your hip flexion too. That was when you went like this. What that's going to affect is when you get to landing. So you build some good energy, you rotate your pelvis. Now you want your trunk to go forward, which is critical because 86% of the energy that goes to the ball comes from the trunk. So if I hit and I can't get my trunk going forward because my hips are tight or my posterior chain's tight, then that's going to slow my trunk down and I'm going to get less of that energy to the ball. So you're a little tight there too. The ideal goals are over here. So you're at like 74 on your landing leg.
Yeah.
So we got to work on that. And that's just going into your lower leg strength. And as you get older, we got to make sure we develop that. Let's see, trunk extension's tight. So being able to roll your spine back that's important because that helps keep your arm back. Because what you're doing with the arm, like the whip, is like the whip, we take a whip and we throw the whip back. We do that so we can push all the force through the handle before the end of the whip goes. So the more force I can push through the handle, the more force is going to pull the end forward, right?
Right.
So same thing here. The more force I can push through my body, and the later I can release my arm, the more energy I can get to the arm.
Right.
So if you're tight here, that means your arm's going to want to go a little early. If I got more of this, my arm wants to stay back. So you can have some issues there. Hip extension. So when you land, we were talking about this has to do this to bring my pelvis around, but you also have to extend your hip to push your hips through. So you're going to be a little tough to get your hips all the way through. So you're seeing a lot of pelvis tightness. You're seeing some extension tightness, but you had good rotation. So you'll overcome that. But we definitely see the tight hips that we got to work on. So what I'm betting is as we go through your delivery, we're going to see your legs collapse and then your arm try to take over and do the work. And we want to see the legs create most of the work. So if we go at a leg lift, I like how you load your back leg. You actually load it really well. So how you're coming down out of your leg lift and how the shin is even coming down is actually really good. Majority of the kids here won't do this that way. So that's really good. The problem I'm going to see is you're probably going to get stuck. Mainly because you were so tight here. So you might get to the point when you get down here, it's so tight you can't get through it. So you open up and then you see it, your foot just turns over into landing.
Right.
So an elite guy, he'd get down there and he'd sprint out of there. He'd be like, boom, right? You get down there and you just turn and roll out of there. So you don't accelerate out of it, which that's a difference in like 15, 20 miles an hour for you when you when you develop that. It's crazy.
Man.
Right? It'd be like if I'm a speed coach and I'm trying to teach you how to fire out of the hole and your first move is to collapse your leg. Just imagine when I teach you how to fire out of the hole, how much faster you are.
That's right.
It's just kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
So that turning over like that, see that back leg just doing this?
Yeah.
We can't do that. We got to sprint through that. We got to push that. We got to accelerate through that. That's a huge part of throwing hard. Okay. So you see it landing when you collapse like that, and that's what we're talking about. You did a good job to get here, but everything collapsed. A lot of the mobility stuff. You got stuck. You got stuck in a hole and you couldn't get out of it. Right? And then what happens is, you see how your gloves dropped at landing? What happens is your arm's like, well, the end of the whip's not going to come through. So your arm's like, well, I'm going to have to go and do it, right? So what you typically do is you pull this down early to pull this around, and then you start trying to use your upper body. So now you become an upper body thrower, as opposed to a ground up thrower.
Right.
You're like taking the whip, instead of using the handle, you're like going up the whip and trying to pull it through, right? It's not the best way to do it. So you can see your glove goes down early. We call it some early trunk rotation. Your knee's giving out, which that's some strength and mobility to stabilize that knee. And then you're releasing the ball way behind your front leg, right? You're releasing the ball back here. An elite guy, he'd be releasing the ball out here because all of his energy would have popped over his front leg. Because he accelerated that energy, he delayed the end, and then when all that launched, it all popped over that front leg and all that energy explodes into the ball.
Right.
So when I see you stuck back here, you didn't accelerate that energy, that momentum forward, and that's it. That's what I said. That's like a 15, even 20 mile an hour difference. I mean, where you are. Okay. So these are all the coolest thing, and I can see you're hearing it that way, is that every little piece I showed you, from the mobility to here that you're not doing well, that's all those improvements to get to that 15, 20 miles an hour.
Right.
So we build all that in. You're throwing 15, 20 miles an hour harder. Okay. So that's got to be your mindset here. I got to come back every 6 months, whatever, and I want to see this, all these points, the mobility, the strength, the athleticism. I want to see that getting better, and then the mechanics getting better. And if we build that, it's like building a house. We build that every year,
Right.
and you just get better. You get better and better. You don't get where a lot of people get is they don't understand this. They don't know what they got to get better at,
Right.
and then they don't work on it. At the end of the day, like I say, this is a blue collar approach. We're going to show you the work. You do the work, you get the result.
That's right.
Right? No, your body's going to grow and change, and some of these will actually improve naturally, but not probably the majority of them won't. So you got to look at it as, hey, I got to do the work to make these things change.
Right.
If you look at, like, just to show you when we're talking about where you need to finish, this is the forward trunk position, what we call it maximum external rotation when your arm's laid back. Yours is -9, so it's actually 9 degrees back. An elite guy would be 40 degrees forward.
Wow.
So that's what I'm saying. If it's like you threw your whip this far, the elite guy throws his whip that far. How much more energy do you think that creates at the end? That's what I'm saying. It's a lot of velocity when you do it.